Hi, Mike Wilkinson here. Thank you very much for joining me for this webinar. And in the next 15 or 20 minutes or so, what we're going to be looking at are the 7 challenges of value. Now, before I begin, I do have an admission to make, and that is a very simple one, and that is I don't have all the answers. Now, I have been working in the area of value and value selling for over 20 years, and I keep coming up with things that still surprise me every now and again. So here are 3 volumes of books about the subjects about value that I don't know. But having said that, in my 20 years, I have actually also written 3 books on value with my colleague Harry McDivitt. They are Value-Based Pricing, which is a McGraw-Hill book, The Challenge of Value, which is a value primer, if you like, which introduces you to the concepts of value, and then latterly the 7 challenges of value, which really is my take on the challenges that we all face as sellers, as sales directors, as senior salespeople. These are the challenges we have got to address if we're going to move from beginning that conversation with the customer at the start all the way through to winning the business at the end. But let's start by just thinking about what is the challenge of value, the value challenge. And I think for all of us really in selling, the challenge is to understand, communicate, and deliver outstanding value to our customers and get paid for it. And that bit at the end must not be forgotten. We do need to be rewarded for the value that we deliver. And I'll say a little bit more about that later on. So that's what we're going to do. So let's introduce the 7 challenges of value, first of all, by taking a step back and sharing with you some of the common challenges that I find businesses are facing all the time when it comes to value and when it comes to selling. And perhaps one of the main ones is that there is still a big tendency to talk product first rather than customer first in our sales conversations with customers. And that is one thing. If you're going to sell on value, you really do need to transform that approach to the sale. We need to talk to the customer about the challenges that they face, the value that they are looking for, the outcomes they want at the beginning of the sales process, so that when we come to talk about us, we can position how we can help them to achieve the things that they're looking to achieve. Now, just turning up and pitching products, throwing stuff at the wall in the vain hope that something might stick, just doesn't work anymore. Certainly, buyers in the more complex sales area are far more sophisticated than they used to be. They don't need you really to tell them all the product features that you have. They can find that out by going on the internet. So it's about having conversations with them so that they feel that they're being listened to, they feel they're being understood, so that you can actually then position your solution far more effectively, because there is another challenge a bit later on which sort of taps into that. And this is part of it. And that is when I do surveys amongst a lot of my clients, one of the number one things that always comes up is they fail to deliver value effectively. And more than 60% of the people who respond to my surveys always have this as a key area where they have an issue. So communicating value effectively is fundamentally important. And if you haven't addressed the first bit through having great customer conversations, that will be a challenge. I hate to say this. Discounting is alive and well. You may have noticed there are businesses who actually use discounting as their strategy to win business. But we're talking about moving away from that. We're talking about having value first conversations, not price first conversations. The problem with discounting is whilst it is easy, it reduces possible revenue, and it certainly impacts on your margins and your profitability. No formal sales process. I know that it can be massively attractive to think that we can do everything, by just winging it and going by the seat of our pants. So you sort of do the sale on the hoof. But the more sophisticated, the more complicated the sale becomes, the decisions that your customers are trying to make become, that simply won't work. So you do need a formal sales process. So do you have a formal sales process in your business that everybody understands and that everybody follows? And I don't mean that that should therefore become absolutely rigid. I actually believe that you should be constantly challenging your sales process to make sure it continues to be fit for purpose. And if you need to change it, then that's absolutely what you should do. But the changes tend to be a finessing of what you do rather than a revolutionary change of approach. And I do, this is by no means the last of the challenges because there's loads of challenges, but one of the ones I do here is people get really hacked off when they feel that they've lost business to competitors, even though they knew or believed that they had the best solution. And I would suggest that the reason for that is that they failed to communicate their value effectively. So again, we go back to where we started. So with those sort of common challenges and whatever other challenges that you can think of that perhaps apply to you, let's take a look at the 7 challenges that I believe we need to address if we're actually going to sell effectively and profitably. And the starting one is challenge one, understand just what value is. Now, that you might think that, well, that's ridiculous. Because we understand what value is. But I would suggest to you that in your business, you may very well use the word value fairly regularly. And you do so in the belief that everybody understands what it is you're talking about. But I would suggest that is not the case because we all have a slightly different perception of what is value. Because what is value to me and what is value to you is likely to be very different. So again, we need to think about value and we need to think about how do we understand the things our customers value. Which takes me to my definition of value, if you like. And this came about, oh gosh, over, well, 20 odd years ago now, I think. And I was doing a conference in Copenhagen with a group of senior salespeople. And we decided we wanted a definition of value. And we spent a little while doing it. And we had a whole variety of different definitions, all of which were different. They had similarities, but they were different. And then amongst all of the ones we came up with was one that became my definition of value. It became my definition that day, and it is still my definition today. And my definition is that value is a mystery. And when I say that, people say you're mad, but it is. If you think about it, until we understand how our customers perceive value, because that's the important thing. How do our customers see value? If we don't know the answer to that, then it is a mystery. And until we understand how our customers see value, value is a mystery, which means that our job is to solve the value mystery. It is to get us to a point where we understand how our customers perceive value, because that then allows us to target our solution far more accurately to demonstrate and address the things that they have identified for us that are important to them. And I mean, we're going to talk about differentiation in a second, but my view is that if you can do that better than your competitors can do, in other words, if you can solve the value mystery and truly understand the customer and what they're looking for, and you can demonstrate to the customer that you understand that, then you will be instantly in a different league to many of your competitors. And again, not a subject for this session, but to think that customers make decisions based purely on logic is to miss a trick. They don't. They base any decision on a mixture of logic and emotion. If you think about the buying decisions you make, that is true. So that emotional connection, the fact that they know that you understand them, helps them to trust and respect your ability to really get to the nub of what's actually challenging them in the first place. So there you go. Just a point that you need to understand value. The second challenge, sadly, is that once you've done all of that, which is absolutely fine, the next thing you need to recognize is that people's value perceptions are changing. Um, we've only got to look around and just think about the business world alone, the number of changes that are taking place. right now. Are just so many. And as every day goes by, there seems to be a change, and it impacts upon what I believe potentially is valuable to me. So if my costs are going up, the things I consider to be value may be changing all the time. So if you've understood customer value, if you've solved the value mystery, don't think that you've now solved it for good, because you haven't. It could be completely different next week. So you need to constantly revisit it in your conversations with your customers. Challenge three is again, when people say to me, who should I talk to in my customers? If I'm pursuing a new sales opportunity, who should I talk to? And it's always great to think that you want to get in at a higher level as you can, because the worst that can happen is that they pass you down to speak to other people. And that's fine. But the way I look at it is the one group of people or the individual that I want to talk to is the person or group of people who are going to benefit the most from the value that I can deliver. Because if I can get them on my side, if I can get them to the point where they go, yeah, absolutely, I can see how what you're proposing really does address the things that we need, that is going to help you so much. Because the reality in business today is that I think I can almost guarantee that whatever business you are in, when the purchase decision is ultimately made, you are not there. The purchase decision is made by your customer in whatever process they have. So you need to understand that. So what is their decision-making process? What are the criteria they're going to use? And how are they going to make the decision? We really need to understand those things. And you need to recognize that you will not be there. So when somebody in that decision-making group says, who should we choose? You want your champion, the people who will benefit the most from your value, to put their hands up and say, I think we should be choosing them, and this is the reason why. So they need to be able to communicate your value and the value of your solution every bit as well as you can. So you need to prepare them. If they need to have calculations on return of investment, you need to make sure that they've got them. If you want them to communicate what it's costing them to do nothing, you want to help them to put that together as well. These people are hugely important. So identify the people who are going to care about your value. And if they're part of that decision-making group, make sure you have prepared them as well as you possibly can to sell effectively on your behalf. Just a thought. So, which leads us on to challenge four. And I said I'd mention differentiation a bit later on, and here we are. Differentiation it's an interesting thing, and being different is not differentiation. Differentiation is being different in ways that your customer values. So in other words, if you've failed to address challenge number one, which is to understand things that your customers value, you're going to find it incredibly difficult to address challenge number four, which is putting together differentiations that actually matter to your customers. So I hope you can see how all of these things are very much linked together. So challenge four is differentiating in ways that matter. Challenge five kind of pulls all of these threads together, doesn't it, if you think about it? Because if we understand what the customer's looking for, we know who the key people are we need to be talking to. We've built our differentiation, and now we can communicate our value. But whenever I do surveys with my clients, very often I find that this is the one thing that they say we don't communicate our value as effectively as we should. Now, if you haven't understood what the things that the customer values in the first place, that is indeed going to be something of a challenge. But the other elements of customer value communication are things like your ability to put together value propositions and to recognize that if we accept that we all see value slightly differently, that you need a different value proposition for different people in the business. So for example, the HR team will look at one thing, the operations team might look at something different. So every group, finance for sure, will be looking at something different. So the value proposition will need to be tweaked finessed a little bit to meet the needs of each of the different groups you talk to. So communicating your value really is absolutely the heart. And if you think about it, there are things that we need to have done to make sure that we can do that effectively. And again, I spend ages with groups going on about how to build value propositions and what you can do to make sure you are communicating value effectively, how you put value calculators together, how you use them, how you talk about return on investment. Importantly, how you talk about the cost of doing nothing, the cost of inaction to motivate them to move forward. So there are lots of things that we could potentially talk about around there. Then I look at challenge number 6, which is if we communicated our value really well, if the customer said absolutely bang on, that's exactly what we now need to share the value in our price. Now, the value-based pricing book I mentioned earlier on, we wrote some time ago, and in that we identified different approaches to pricing. And one of the most common we still see is cost plus, where you add up all the costs associated with producing your product or service, add a margin onto it, and bingo, you have a price. And there are lots of benefits to doing that. It is relatively straightforward, but there is a big, big negative to it, and that is that it completely fails to capture any of the value that you're delivering to your customer. It removes any incentive to reduce your cost of production, because if you do on a cost plus pricing basis, your profits go down. It's not a great approach. So capturing your value through price becomes really important. And it is about sharing that value. So being able to communicate it effectively and negotiate effectively around those price parameters becomes key. Challenge 7. Ooh, we finally got there. Challenge 7, add all of those things together, and then you've got to deliver and measure the value you promised. Now, interestingly enough, one of the things I find is that, as sellers, we are the folk who tend to go out there and make the value promise to our customers. So we find out what they want, we communicate our value, and we demonstrate the solution that we think will deliver that. But the reality is, of course, we don't deliver that personally. It's the organization that delivers the value that we have promised on our behalf to a degree, if you think about it. But that means for me anyway, that it is important that it isn't just the sales team that understands value, but everybody in the business needs to understand value. Everybody needs to understand what their role is in understanding and delivering great customer value. And that is often a bit of a problem. I don't know how well you work together with other teams inside your business, but one of the things I do find is there is a lack of understanding from some of the internal departments as to the real value that they bring to that customer interaction. And part of, I think, what we need to do is to try to spread the value message around the organization. Now, it also says there that you need to measure the value you promised, and that I think is absolutely key. We want to be sure that the value that we promise is the value that we are delivering, and we have to measure it on an ongoing basis. Because if we're not delivering that value, we need to address it, and we need to be open with the customer, and we need to agree what the next best steps are to get back on track. Because the reality is we don't want this to be a one-off sale. We don't want them to walk away at the end of the contract because we failed to deliver, especially if you're in a subscription business where you need people to constantly resubscribe. So yeah, absolutely make sure that you're delivering it, and make sure that you have perhaps quarterly meetings, whatever's appropriate with your buying team to demonstrate the value you're delivering. Because there's another point. I absolutely guarantee that if you're delivering great value to your customers, they'll completely forget about that. But if you're falling short in any way, they'll be fairly quick to remind you of that fact. So either way, we need to be there to make sure we're communicating our value. So there you have it, 7 challenges of value. And I think that you need to address all of them. And I hope you've seen during the course of the last however long it's been, how they are very much interlinked. It's very difficult to do one without having done the other, but they all start with challenge number one. They all start with understanding value, both as a concept and in terms of how it impacts individual customers. So if you want any help looking at those things, particularly understanding value, then please get in touch. That really is the focus of what I do, which kind of leads me on to next steps. So the first thing I'd really, really love is to have a meeting with you, a talk with you about value and the value challenge that you may be facing. Um, I will be running more of these, and I will be running Value Challenge live sessions. So if you see one, do please make sure you book in. It'd be great, great to meet you and talk to you really face to face. Spread the word. I'm kind of on a mission, I think. I see, and I don't mean this in a nasty, well, yeah, I suppose I do really. There's a lot of mediocrity out there in the sales world today, and I want to help generate sales excellence, not sales mediocrity. So spread the word. Value and value selling is the ultimate for consultative selling, in my view. So yeah, please tell your colleagues, tell your friends, whoever you want. Number four, join me on LinkedIn. If you're not already connected, do please connect with me. I publish a fortnightly newsletter on a value related topic, which is going really well, if I have to say, even if I say so myself. It's really getting great readership. So please book in and book into that. And finally, my final wish for you as I say goodbye is keep selling the value. Anyway, look, thank you very much indeed for spending your time with you. I hope it has been valuable and you've got a lot out of it. If you have, then please make sure you get in touch, say hi to me, drop me a DM, drop me a message, join me on LinkedIn, whatever works for you. But I hope to see you again very soon. Thanks for listening.